Thank you, Patrick. Good evening and welcome everyone to the August 2nd Select Board meeting. Let's stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we're going to begin today with a short discussion with Mary Jane Lightbody, who has come to talk to us about the experience that we've had recently in South Walpole with concert traffic and so forth. So, Mary Jane, thank you for coming and being prepared to speak to us tonight. Just by way of a little bit of context, we had a couple of concerts earlier this summer where the traffic down in South Walpole just got crazy out of control. We think a lot of it had to do with some of the applications that drivers use to navigate, which caused them to come into the neighborhoods in ways they hadn't done in the past. We responded to that, and I think we had some success with the two Elton John concerts that occurred last week. But Mary Jane, I know you've got some thoughts on the whole situation, so I really appreciate you coming and talk to us.
I did, and I don't want to take a lot of time, but to really, we all from our area, thank you so much. It was like we had our neighborhoods back, and Jim came to our house to make sure we were okay, and thank you for that. But it was a great communication, and I myself went from house to house to house to house, as you know, and acquired feedback and had some news media. The news media actually was really helpful and getting people off of the side streets. So, thank you. The question I have is how and why was this event successful compared to the one before? Was it a combination of town, police? Can you answer that for us?
Jim, you want to take it?
I can take it. So I think it was successful for multiple reasons. It wasn't just this, here's the answer. It was, I think, our police department, specifically Chief Kelleher, Deputy Chief Kilroy, the lieutenants work hard to work with Waze and Google Maps to synchronize the road closings, similar to what was done in Foxborough. We worked with them closely to ensure that we were doing the right thing, something that wasn't illegal according to their policies and procedures on there. That worked. Getting the news media out there, Fox 25, Channel 5, NBC I saw out there. They got the word on. I think I was listening to 100.7. I heard it advertised on there too, on the radio. I also think that it may have been a different type of crowd, and I think us working closely with everyone, listening to the residents, the feedback that we got, and meeting with Chief Kelleher and the Deputy Chief and their administration, saying what did we do wrong? What could we have done better? Where were the specific problem areas, specifically South Street, Pine Street, Eldor Drive, Clinton, Irving Drive, some of those streets where it just didn't make sense where the people were stationed, so we stationed police officers at the front. We kindly greeted them, said, where are you off to? I think some of the people who park on Schufelt, they still were able to go down there and park at the end. And just deter the people, the concert goers from using some of the side streets. So that was the first time we've tried working with Waze, and it really worked very well, and it worked well the second night too. I pulled up the maps and on Google, I use Google Maps, and all the roads were closed on there. So
Right. Does Google pull from Waze?
I believe they do.
Okay. I mean, that's all new for me, but, so will that be used again
Yes,
in
it will.
August for the Country Fest? Okay. The question I had was, we talked to a couple of the police officers who were very friendly and helpful at the end of our street. Will they be working the details for the next Country Fest or next event? Do they want to work?
That is the plan, to have them work especially for the Country Fest events. I think the Patriots games are always kind of a different animal. You get the same type of people who go there during the events. Preseason may be a little bit different on Thursday nights. I know people give their tickets away or bring little kids to it. So we're going to try to use the same plan for the game this week against the Giants, and then against the Panthers, and then for the two at the end of August too.
Okay. And if there weren't enough police force to cover, is there another solution where?
Yes, we actually had a backup plan in place.
Okay.
That backup plan, we reached out to Foxborough and asked them what they do if they're unable to fill some of those details. They actually utilize some of the DPW workers and pay them overtime. Rick Matson's been kind enough to say, hey, if you have issues filling those, or you can't get enough officers out there, we could put it out to DPW and basically station a truck in front of there. Obviously, they don't have arrest powers, but if there are issues, they can radio down to South Walpole, the center there, and reach out to them. So that's the tentative backup plan.
Okay, and I don't know how you can answer this, but does the stadium reimburse the town of Walpole for the details?
Yes, they do.
And you have enough for the continuum of 2022?
They haven't sent a bill back to date, that's for sure. So, yes.
Okay, okay, that's great. And so what are the Country Fest plans? Just what you reiterated?
Yeah, and the backup plan was to address Water Street if necessary. The police department really feels as though they feel very strongly that Water Street needs to remain open. I know people called for Water and Summer Street to be closed. They weren't closed because they're major thoroughfares through town. People, not only Walpole residents, but Norfolk residents utilize them to get down to that end of Norfolk near Fort Kick. So right now, the plan is the same one we had in place for Elton John, and to keep that going. The police chief was down there himself doing traffic detail. The deputy chief was out on Pine Street making sure everything was stayed off of there. So all hands were on deck, and we'll continue to do that. That's the plan.
Okay. Well, thank you for calming our neighborhoods. I mean, I personally did not realize how much I value our quiet streets until they're not quiet.
Yeah.
You know, even though we're between Washington and Route 1, it's still a quiet area. So, anybody else have?
Just fabulous. We really appreciate this.
Well, you're welcome.
We'll continue to support you.
Well, and I have to say, I think this is a great example of collaboration. Jim and I think Chief Kelleher demonstrated great leadership, owned the problem, figured it out. The deputy chief worked with Ways. We worked directly with the residents. We got a number of people writing into us or calling. All of that input was factored in. I think there was a lot of good two-way communication here, and collectively, I think we got ahead of this one. So now the question is sustaining it, to your point, and we'll start that with Country Fest and continue. But I think we've got the right recipe in place now to prevent this from being a problem going
Mary
forward.
Happ, I didn't add her name because she's on vacation, and but
Yep.
she was very instrumental.
Yeah, she was.
in preparing the Ways PDFs that I did send
She was
to you.
helpful.
Her analysis was very helpful.
Yeah.
And, so we, as I said, I thought it was a great collaboration
Yeah.
among the residents and the police and the town administration, and just, we got a good outcome.
Thank you. Well, let us know if you need us again.
We will.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Jane. Appreciate you being here. Thanks, everyone. Okay. All right, next on our agenda is, we have a show cause hearing for Maway Inc., DBA Kai Dynasty. A little background on this one. This is a continuation of the 422 meeting that we had, which was show cause to whether we should revoke the all alcohol liquor license from the Kai because they had not been operating for a couple of years. At the April 22nd meeting, the owner of the Kai said that she felt they might have a buyer. We agreed to another 90-day extension, so we continued the hearing to tonight. Apparently that didn't happen, and so the owner has actually turned in the license, and it's been turned in. So we really don't have a need to continue the hearing, so what I'd ask is just a motion to close the hearing, and we'll move on.
Make a motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
400. All right, next we have Peter Frazier from Hilltop Securities. Peter, good, nice to see you again. If you could just come out to there while I set the stage here for what we're going to talk about. So we had an override some months ago to get approval to build a new middle school in town. That middle school is going to require borrowing. Earlier this year, we had a similar discussion with Peter and among the board members to determine how to handle the initial borrowings for the middle school. And especially since we knew that interest rates were moving up, we thought it's smart to borrow a big chunk right up front which we did. It was about $50 million, which was middle school and some other things. And we got a great rate,
269.
Yeah, 269, which was well below our budget at 425. So we felt very good about that decision, and the outcome of that borrowing saved the town. Our estimate is $7.5 million, so that was a very good outcome. We're asking ourselves that same question now as we go to the second stage of borrowing and looking at the interest rate environment and the economy as in general. And what we want to talk about tonight is, and Peter, this is why you're here to provide some input to this, around where we see direction of muni rates going over the next year, 18 months. Is it smart to accelerate the borrowing or not? Are there other options we should be thinking about, like splitting the difference to take some of the risk off the table? But as we all know, we know none of us is clairvoyant. We don't know exactly what's going to happen, and should rates move down, it would be nice to take advantage of that as well some point down the road. So those are the things that are considerations before the board tonight: is accelerate the borrowing or not, given the rate environment, or do a part of it and hold off the rest, all in an effort to reduce the risk to the town, the financial risk to the town, and hopefully save the town some money. So that's what we're here to talk about tonight. And so, Peter, let me turn it over to you to perhaps give us some perspective on the muni market, where you see it today, where you see it going over the next 18 months. And then what we'll do is we'll open up to the board for questions and answers to you, and we'll go from there. Okay?
Great.
Well, actually, before I hand it over to you, Jim, anything you would add to that?
No, I think now's the time to discuss this. I've watched it closely along with Jody and Lisa, the rates. We've had a couple of discussions leading up to this. And, I'd like to have Peter tell you directly some of the risk reward and what are the factors going into it, so.
Great. Great.
Well,
Thanks.
first, thank you very much for having me come out tonight. As you mentioned, the town had borrowed in February $50 million, of approximately $78 million of the town share of this project. So locked in at a very attractive interest rate of 2.69, call it 2/3 of the town share cost. At this point, we've seen interest rates rise. If you think of the Fed funds rate, which is controlled by the Federal Reserve, they raised it from about 25 basis points. It's now at 250. So that may not seem like a lot to people, but in terms of the amount of that movement within that period of time, it's really quite extraordinary. We're also seeing inflation. I'm sure everybody who's watching the news or going to the grocery store is seeing that inflation right now is running at almost 9%. And so that's not translating sort of one-to-one with respect to interest rates. Right now, we're seeing Andover, town of Andover, which is AAA rated municipality, Westwood also AAA, so one notch above where you guys are at. 30-year borrowing in July at about a 275 and a 375 and a 378 respectively. So, and that was before the most recent uptick by the Fed. So we're thinking you guys right now, if you were entering the market today, you'd be close to 4%, maybe a little below, a little above, but that sort of neighborhood. And what that would do in terms of the total cost of your project between the 2.69 on the first 50 million and depending on how much you do, if you did say 25, that would sort of average out to somewhere in the 4% or maybe below range. So it would, the advantage of that would be that it's within your sort of target of what you were estimating when the project originally came out. In terms of sort of predicting the future, your comment about clairvoyance, we don't have a crystal ball either, but it's pretty clear that the Federal Reserve has not only made some pretty extraordinary increases the last two times of 75 basis points or 0.75% upticks in each of the last two meetings, but they have another meeting in September, and there's talk about another increase. You know, historically, they sort of move in quarter point increments. So the fact that they did a 50 basis point, 0.5% in the beginning of the year, and then 275s back to back means that they're really trying to be serious about getting inflation under control by raising interest rates. So the long and the short of it is we're seeing the sort of consensus view is interest rates are going to continue to rise in the near term. You know, who knows really in terms of where things will be a year from now, but to the extent that you're considering borrowing now to lock in, I think the attitude should not be, well, we know interest rates are going to be higher in the future. It is, if we do this, we're mitigating the risk that interest rates will be significantly higher in the future. So again, you know, I think the town was very forward-thinking with respect to the last move and locking in that first tranche while interest rates were still very low. You know, you have an opportunity now to lock in some more. Whether that, you know, only time will tell whether that beat what the interest rates will be a year from now or not. But it at least will give you some certainty and eliminate that element of risk in terms of this project. Does that make sense?
It makes great sense to me. I have some questions, but before I ask mine, I'd like to invite the rest of the board to ask the questions they may have. So who'd like to go first? Glenn.
If I can, yeah, thanks, Peter, and thanks for meeting with me a couple weeks back. You were a lot of help. I've been putting a lot of thought into this, and I think the thing that is hardest and most difficult for me is everything you're hearing, all the things that we know that we're talking about. We know that inflation is high. We know economic conditions are uncertain. I feel like a lot of that's priced in. You know, what we already know is already priced into what the interest rate is reflecting, and it's what we don't know. It's what's going to happen with the economy. Is inflation going to continue? Is the Fed raising interest rates going to have the effect that they're intending and going to tamp down on inflation? And it's what we don't know that's going to affect the future. I think it's going to affect the future of interest rates. And so so I did like how you phrased it. It's we're not really going with what we know and what we don't know. We're just going to mitigate the risk of that uncertainty. And so that to me actually makes a lot of sense. So that's my quick little speech. But I have a couple quick questions. Some for you, maybe some for Jim. When are we going to actually do the borrowing? I know we're at the beginning of August now. We're not going to borrow next week or the week after. How long does it take to actually schedule this?
Peter would probably be.
Well, I meant that for Peter. Yeah, you're next.
Actually, we can borrow whenever
we can.
you agree that that's the right time.
Okay.
But one of the thoughts was, and Jim was the driver on this, was saying, let's, you know, interest rates are low now. Let's not wait until the next Fed meeting. Let's prepare to
Okay.
be ready to enter the market.
Got
I
it.
think our schedule would be a rating call within the next week or so, a sale on the 17th, and close around the 1st of September. So the idea would be, you know, locking in, and this is, you know, sort of full speed ahead mode.
Yeah, I got it.
And lock in before the Fed meets again in September.
So the
So
17th?
that would be one alternative. Obviously, if you know, the board decides otherwise, we'll do whatever, you know, we're prepared to respond however.
And the rates between now and 3 weeks from now, they're going to fluctuate, but there's not going to be unless something happens, right?
Right.
But we don't expect any
I
roller
think
coasters.
and to the point where when the Fed raises interest rates, usually interest rates have, you know, they sort of telegraph what they're thinking, and rates will move in anticipation of what they think the next move is going to be.
Yeah.
If the, you know, if the consensus view was they're going to raise it 25 basis points next time versus 75 basis points, you know, you'd see a gradual increase towards that 25. But if, you know, everybody's thinking 25 and all of a sudden they raise it 75, there would be a shock to the system where the rates would move, you know, dramatically, in a short period of time.
Yeah.
But usually, to your point, the markets anticipate, okay, we're on this sort of trajectory, and so the interest rates inch up kind of daily.
Sure.
Between the various meetings.
And the other part that I'm kind of struggling with is we're talking about like a 6-month timeline. We kind of have a sense of what the Fed's going to do in September. Maybe again they meet in November or December. But on a 12-month timeline and then on an 18-month timeline, from what I understand, the Fed at some point we hope is going to be in a position to start lowering interest rates again. So if we're looking at the 18-month timeline, which I think we might have that kind of timeline based on our needs for actually spending the money. The Fed may actually be going in the other direction.
Nobody knows.
Yeah.
Yep.
But from what I understand, that is almost beginning to be priced in as the expectation that they're going to
The
increase,
futures market, yeah,
and then lower.
that's a good point. And it's not that anybody knows, but obviously experts are looking at the markets. They're looking what the drivers of inflation are. They're looking at how sort of sincere the Fed is being about trying to get inflation under control. That they're taking pretty dramatic steps for them. And so there is some thinking that, a year or two out, maybe things start to settle down again. Maybe some supply chain issues get sorted out. Who knows what's going to go on with Russia and Ukraine. There's so many different factors that play into this.
Yeah.
I don't mean to come down on both sides of the fence, but it's more the point that we really don't know where things are going to be a year or two from now, but we do know where things are now. And from my standpoint, having been doing this for 36 years, seeing these interest rates at 4%, those used to be considered, wow, that's a really great market. That's a really attractive interest rate climate to be borrowing in.
Yeah.
We've since 2008 and the Great Recession, we've seen these extraordinarily low interest rates, and hard to know if we'll ever see those again.
Right. Yeah, got it. All right. So real quick, I have a couple more, Jim, if that's okay.
Oh, go right ahead.
So on the subject of the timeline, and this might not be a question for you, or maybe it is, but so the $50 million that we have already borrowed, how much have we spent? How much will we be spending between now and, maybe you can kind of like generally lay it out for me. And when will we begin to need beyond the $50 million? So the money that we're talking about borrowing today, is it 18 months out that we actually are going to need this? Is it 15 months? What is the general timeline on that?
I don't have the project schedule, the cost estimate schedule on me, but from what I recall, bills have been running, I'm looking at Jody and Patrick, not very high. I mean, we hit $1 million a month or anything like that? No. Do you remember, Pat?
It's not a lot.
It's hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, so the
but
50 million is
we
gonna
haven't
last
hit
us.
that.
Yeah.
That's going to start going once the February. Yeah.
Just started
Right.
the last week or so that's really kind of now that started, but we'll see those expenses start to come.
The big bills will start to come in once construction starts, and we had a call with Brian this morning, and that's really not going to start until the real construction. We have some construction going on out there. February we're looking or something like that,
Yeah.
and that's when we'll get into the millions per month.
So
each
we're a year out
We have
from
time.
needing this
Yeah.
money at least,
Yeah.
if not 15 months or so.
That's a good, 15, 18 months, yeah.
So I just wanted to get a sense of how much it costs us to hold on to this money, because we borrow $25 million or $23 million today or this month, but we don't need it for 18 months. We're going to pay interest on that for 18 months, and we're going to pay 4% interest, which is $400,000, I guess, a year. I'm sorry, that number's not correct, but it's maybe I want to get a sense of how much it's going to cost us to hold this money for 18 months. I guess I'm looking at you, Lisa. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but because I know the reason I'm looking at you is because from what I understand, we can reinvest the money
It is.
while we hold it.
Correct.
It's actually, it's in a, safe investment strategy, so whatever we make is what we make, and we're actually limited to what we make, because you can't borrow money and not use it, so, the cost of the investment is not a concern, because we're getting interest on it.
Is it a percent? Is it 1.5% return?
Oh, yeah, and it's it's invested wisely, it's invested in some treasury bonds and things like that. We have a company, an investment company that's handling the money, it's not a bank, so they're investing based on the cash flow needs, so depending on when we spend the money is when we earn it, so.
Got it, yeah. So, so it's gonna cost us, if we're paying 4% interest and we, or 4.25, and we're getting 1.5 in return, it's gonna cost us about 3%, of that 25 million. Is that right?
Yeah, and I can speak to the borrowing costs
Yeah.
in terms of what the investment earnings are. That's more Lisa's bailiwick.
Sure.
But the idea would be, to the extent that interest rates are rising, those investment rates are likely to rise too.
Okay.
So I'm not minimizing
No, I
your
understand.
point, because it's a very good one. But it may be a situation where the interest rates on our investments go up over time.
Sure.
So that's taking some of the sting out of borrowing that money before you actually need to spend it.
Sure, so there's, I guess my point, just to reiterate it, is there's hundreds of thousands of dollars in costs associated with holding on to the money, but there's also 30 years worth of potential savings. If we're not paying 5%, we're paying 4% instead.
Right.
So again, that goes into the mitigation of the risk, but that is another cost that's involved here.
Can I just jump in with a question that's directly related? So I guess my question is it really an additional cost, or is it simply an accelerated payout? So you borrow for 30 years, or you borrow for 30 years. You don't borrow for 30 years and 18 months, right? You borrow for 30 years.
Correct.
And so you when the municipal bond actually gets sold into the markets, our costs are our costs over the 30 years, correct?
Right, but you know, to Glenn's point, the idea is if you don't need to borrow right now to fund the project, then you'd wait, right? Because if you can't earn equal to or more than the borrowing cost, you would, in a perfect world, if you knew exactly what you needed when you needed, and you didn't have this interest rate risk issue, you would wait and borrow when you actually
But my
needed the
point
funds.
is, if we're trying to mitigate the interest rate risk,
Right.
it doesn't cost us any more money in total. It's
Correct.
just accelerated payback of the bond,
Yep,
correct?
that's correct.
Okay. So
I see your point.
You got that?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, Glenn, I just want to make sure we're
No,
clear on that. Go ahead.
I'm probably okay for now. I mean, if I could come back at the end.
Okay, sure, yeah. Ally?
Glenn's questions were really kind of what I was also thinking, and I'm just would like to hear from, Jim, Jody, and them, see what they're thinking on it. I mean, for me, mitigating risk would be where I would like to go. We did borrow that 50 million early, and I'm feeling right now that we should start borrowing the remainder that we need now.
Mark, anything you would like to?
Yeah, I would say that I'm sort of in the camp of borrow the money sooner rather than later. I don't think any of us knows the future. Glenn was asking some good questions, and I don't know that anybody can do it, but if there was a way to chart out, we've borrowed now, here's the trend, if the interest rate went up a point, how much did we save by borrowing early? Just look at some scenarios. I don't know if that's something that could be done, but that's what I immediately started thinking about. We borrowed it, locked in at I think you said 269. What is that, if the interest rate hits 4, what does that mean to us of savings over, the 29 years that we still have that? So I would lean toward borrowing. I remember when interest rates were in the teens, and that was a long time ago, but I do remember those days. And I don't think we're going to get back to that point, hopefully, but I'd sort of lean toward borrowing sooner rather than later. And if anybody had the ability to make a chart or something to give us an idea, that would be helpful for me, but it's, not a requirement, just more of an interest.
Okay. Well, why don't we do this? Let's open it up to Jim and the finance team and get your perspectives. And I still have a couple of other questions, but let's go down that path first, okay?
You know,
I would prefer to borrow sooner than later.
Could you just come up to the mic, Jody? Thank you.
We have a lot of people at home watching, so.
I tend to agree with Mark, and I think it would make more sense to borrow sooner than later. There is a cost to that, of course, but we also don't know, when that will cover itself, if that makes any sense. So to me, I think it's smarter for us to go forward with it, especially, you know, if they're gonna be meeting again in September, if we can get in before that time, I think that would be beneficial.
Okay.
So Glenn, just to answer your question, I found the cash flow schedule. So back in April, we paid out about 351, May 682. Last 2 months it has jumped. June was $1 million, July was 3.5 according to the schedule. And I'm looking at this, I'm like, wow, we're going through that 50 million really quick. I had to remind myself it was a $115 million authorization. Each month we submit a reimbursement to the MSBA, and they've been really consistent about paying us once those get submitted a couple weeks afterwards. So that's where we're at as far as the cash flow is. As far as where I stand on this one, I am mindful that we initially went to the voters and said, well, we probably won't hit you for all of this right up front. We'll wait, we'll take some time. But I'm also mindful that we've never seen a situation with inflation the way it is. And I think we'll be able to save the taxpayers of Walpole some money unless we decide to wait. We told them 4.25%, I believe, in all those meetings we had with everyone. I think if we were able to lock up, initially when I went into the call with Peter, I said, we're gonna go forward with the whole 27 million, right? And they talked me through it, and by the end of the call, I was down to about, well, $20 million. And you don't have to go forward with the whole 27, 22, 20. You could go forward with 18 and a half and not borrow it, to kind of go back to what you were saying, because you know what, maybe things come in great, and the MSBA towards the end of the project do take some time to reimburse the town for everything. So we could go forward with a lesser amount. It's just, we're looking for you folks to tell us thumbs up, thumbs down with going forward with borrowing, and let us know how much you're comfortable with, because if you're comfortable with, you know, 18 million, 18 and a half, 20, great, but I think now's the time. When we had this call a few weeks ago, I wasn't aware that the Fed was gonna raise the rates. I think it was Thursday or Wednesday. And when I saw the Marshfield and the Andover numbers, I said, I'd love to lock in there, because I always look at it as an average, and we were in the mid-twos. I think North Andover, or Andover was in 3.7 or something like that. We're still coming in below what we told the taxpayers of Walpole, so that's why I'm bringing forward this now, to more or less mitigate the risk. We know it's here. I don't know if the rates are gonna be 5% or 5.25 if we wait, like you said, 15 or 18 months, so.
Yeah, gotcha.
We don't have to borrow the whole amount.
Yeah. Can I just piggyback on that for Peter? And you had mentioned that last piece, you know, so the 20 million, or the 18 and a half to 20 million, I think that's probably the consensus is that we do go forward with that. It's that last 7 or 8 million. And you were talking about and you mentioned the reimbursables from the state, where if we get 100% reimbursed, then maybe we don't need to actually utilize the entire borrowing.
Or we don't use the contingency.
Or we don't use the contingency. Is some of that part of the contingency?
Yeah, what a lot of communities do with big school projects like this, because of the way the MSBA reimburses, and because of the sort of unpredictability oftentimes with exactly what the price is going to be at the end of the day, because of certain ineligibles, you know, whether there's going to be more or less than what they anticipated the town share would be. So what they'll do is permanently finance a portion, and then leave a portion unfinanced or financed via short-term notes, bond anticipation notes, that gives them the flexibility if they borrowed, you know, 5 million and they only needed 3, they could retire the note with $3 million of bond proceeds and pay off the balance with the unspent proceeds of the note. Yeah. And so that it gives you a chance to sort of settle up more precisely than you would if you borrowed everything up front. You might find that you borrowed more than you needed, or if you borrowed a little less than you needed, now you've got to borrow some tiny little bond issue that might not be terribly efficient if you have to authorize additional for the project. So anyway, that's a common way to hold back a little bit.
Yeah, and by a little bit, I mean 20 million today, this month, and 7 or 8 at the end.
Sure.
Is
Yeah.
that
I mean,
reasonable?
there's no sort of secret formula to that. It's kind of whatever you're comfortable with.
Okay, those numbers make sense to me.
Just to add, I just pulled it up. So we have budgeted $6,481,000 in contingency. We're at 60% design. I think we'll probably talk a little bit about it later on tonight, but we do have that money set aside, contingency at this point.
Okay.
So, any other questions or comments? Just got a couple of quick wrap-up points here. So, I think the key points to be taken out of this discussion are, this is about risk mitigation, given that none of us knows what's really gonna happen with interest rates. We certainly have indications of what might be happening with interest rates, and those indications tell us rates likely continue to move up, at least in the near term. Now, it's important to note that what the Fed does really affects the front end of the curve, not the back end of the curve, okay? The things that affect the back end of the curve are more supply-oriented. So you mentioned supply chain disruptions and things like that, and I started to hear those words again on the news tonight. Of course, things like inflation, of course, things like unknowns with Ukraine and Russia. So the long end tends to be affected by the more macro environment, as opposed to the Fed controlling the front end of that curve, where you see very direct connection between the what the Fed does and the front end of the curve rates up through the 10-year. So all that said, I think we need to acknowledge a couple things. There are indications that the long-term rates might be down a year from now. They are actually down right now over where they were recent highs. So we need to acknowledge that this is a risk mitigation play, an interest rate risk mitigation play based on what we know today. And what we know today is we have a good rate and it's less than what we budgeted. All good news to the taxpayers of Walpole. 18 months from now, we'll all have perfect knowledge. And rates may be at 5%, in which case, this looks like a very good decision. Rates might be at 2.5%, in which case you sort of back the other way. And I think it's just important for us as a board and for the people who are listening to acknowledge that, this is the discussion we're having. These are the reasons why we would be thinking about doing this now as opposed to waiting, because there is real uncertainty with waiting. There is far less uncertainty about moving right now. We know what we have. A lot of uncertainty as you look ahead to 18 months from now. And so we're likely to be second-guessed regardless of what we do. I think people just need to see that, we understand that, we've debated it, we've discussed it, we've taken into account those things that we can today that we know are the facts of the day, and that in an effort to, live up to the commitments we've made to the taxpayers of Walpole, it would seem to me as though it makes a lot of sense to be borrowing now. I do like the idea of splitting the baby, if you will, and saying, look, I don't need to borrow the full 27 million. I may never need to borrow the full 27 million. So let's borrow something less than that. Is that 16? Is it 18? Is it 20? We should probably talk about that next. And then say, look, we've at least then hedged that much more risk. And then if we do need to borrow more, then, we'll be at the mercy of, of what happens 18 months from now. So it seems to me as though that's a logical way to go. And now the question, and I sense there's support for that in the board. So I think that the question really now is, what's that amount? What's the amount that we want to lock in on and take that risk off the table? So I'd be, open to discussion on that if anyone has any thoughts.
I think what Glenn was suggesting is borrow the money we know we need and not borrow the reserves. So maybe a $20 million number. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
20 million is the number that I would have said if
Okay.
you didn't say it first.
I'm thinking 20 as well, so.
Jim, your thoughts?
I was just running it at 18 in case you went at 18, but 20's good for me. I'm comfortable with that.
Okay.
Jim made a compelling case.
Jody? Make sense? Yeah, I think it does too. So I think that's where we're all landing. Do we need a motion?
Motion to direct the town administrator, treasurer, collector, and the finance director to move forward with the 20 million borrowing for this month for the middle school project.
Seconded.
Motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
400. Peter, thanks again, as always. We really
Thank you
appreciate
very
your
much.
insights.
Appreciate it.
Peter, just for the board's edification, we're on track probably to bring us back to them at the end of this month. I think they're meeting on the 26th, isn't it?
I believe
23rd,
we're
yeah.
scheduled to sell the bonds on the 17th, which, and I believe there's a meeting between the 17th and the 1st.
Excellent.
That you'd have all the information.
Okay.
Great. Thanks again.
Really appreciate your help.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Jody, Lisa, thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, next up, we have the discussion and vote on the date and location of fall town meeting. Liz, I know you're here. Do you want to come up and talk about anything on this? And I'm going to advance two of the new business items too, so we can help you get finished early. But any thoughts that you want to mention here?
I know that the warrant is written to possibly for a vote right for the Saturday, October 22nd. I personally am okay with that. My early voting for the November election starts that day, but this wouldn't be the first time that's happened, so I think we've got that kind of figured out. So I'm good with a Saturday. That works for me. That will work for my staff. We're good with that. Whether you have it outside or in, you know, that, again, that's at your discretion too, what you want to do with that.
I know I had reached out to Dan, I think he might have got tied up, but we did that straw poll at a town meeting at the beginning, and it seemed split. What do you prefer, Saturday or back to the regular Monday? So that didn't make things any easier on us. I can tell you that the charter, if we go by the charter, we'd hold it on October 17th at 7:30. That 7:30 set in stone per the charter. Or we were tentatively talking about Saturday at 10 a.m., just as we did this past town meeting. So ultimately, it's your call, what you'd like to do. I've heard people say it's great on Saturdays, but I've also heard people express concern that they're not able to get to the kids' sporting events or, you know, do things on the weekend like apple picking or something. So we're just looking for some direction so we can plan. The warrant's open till the end of this month. Right now, I'm at about 12 to 14 articles-ish. So it's not a heavy town meeting at this point, but I know the bylaw committee's still working through some of their things, and who knows if we get any citizens petitions in. I don't expect any street openings, so that's where we're at. We're prepared to go either way.
Okay. Thoughts from the board?
It's a mix. What I've heard for comments, I think parents that are RTMs with younger children have a difficult time on Saturday because usually it takes two parents to get them to each activity and all the sporting activities, and it is difficult. I know at the Springtown meeting, some people did not realize it was Saturday until they received their mail packet. They were not aware that that they had just assumed it would have gone back to the Monday nights. So they were unaware until that packet arrived at their house for the RTMs. I personally usually can manage a Monday or a Saturday, but I know it's a split. And if it's kind of a light town meeting, I kind of think we could get it done in one night on a Monday night. But I know the 7:30, I mean, I think that people would prefer to start 6:30 if we were gonna do it at nighttime, and I know the 7:30 is a hard number, so,
Go either way.
yeah, I know.
Okay, Glenn?
So I think it is split, and the people who, I think it's kind of interesting. It was really well run and well done on Saturdays. I think it was kind of, and again, interesting way to do it at the beginning of the day. So I kind of enjoyed it, but the feedback I've gotten from people who want to go back to Monday has been pretty strong. They think that's, number one, that's the charter, and that's what it dictates that we do. And number two, it does seem to be a challenge with the sporting events and the scheduling conflicts. Not a lot of people have a lot of important things to do on Monday night, I guess, at 7:30 to 11 p.m. Whereas at Saturday, again, most people have things scheduled on Saturdays. So I think the way to respond to people's concerns is to go back to a Monday. Again, I could go either way myself, but I just think the feedback has been pretty strong to go back to a Monday.
Okay, Mark?
Yeah, I would agree with Glenn. I think eventually we're going to go back to the Monday, Wednesday routine. And I think we were lucky with weather for a couple of the town meetings. It's probably time to move back to the Monday, Wednesday routine, unless something really came back strong on the COVID front. It's probably time to go back, so that'd be my suggestion.
When we had the last town meeting, I think Dan did poll the town meeting members. I don't remember what the result of that was. Do you remember?
It was about 50-50. There was no,
Split.
There was no definitive.
I was hoping it would win out one way or the other,
Well,
just.
but I feel like there was a lot of people that missed the meeting because of conflicts of the Saturday. So there was a lot of First Communions, there was events, people had already booked things. They were not aware, they had assumed that we would go back to the charter in the Monday nights. So I think it was not as well attended by RTMs.
I know when that straw poll was asked, I voted for Monday, Wednesday. So I'm going to stick with that. So do we have consensus Monday, Wednesday?
I agree with that.
I think
Okay. Ally, can you give us a motion, please?
Yes. A motion to hold the fall town meeting on Monday. What does Monday say? October 17th. Monday, October 17th, beginning at 7:30 PM at the high school.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
4-0-0.
Thank you.
I'd like to advance a couple of items of new business now, if we could. One, to vote on the September primary warrant, and the second one to vote to appoint election officers. So Liz, if you could just hang with us for that, you can then head out. So can you talk to us about the primary warrant and what the vote is all about?
Before every state election, you guys do sign the warrant because it is under the hands of you that it then goes to the constable to hang in the precincts. What's different about this one, and I feel like it's 2020 all over again, every time I come in, there's new rules. So the new rule for this one is this will be the first time we've had the 2A and the 5A and the 8A for sub-precincts. 8A is not active. It's never going to be active. You can't possibly move into 8A. But it's on a ballot. So what we need is we have the polling locations for precincts 1 and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. You guys are the select board before you, when they ever designated those as polling places, have always been that. But seeing that we have the sub-precincts, we now need to designate the polling places. So the polling locations on the warrant for precincts 1, 2, and now 2A will be at Old Post Road School. Precincts 3, 4, 5, and 5A will be at Blackburn Hall. And precincts 6, 7, 8, and 8A will be at Fisher School. These sub-precincts are the results of the 2020 federal census and the movement of the lines. The legislative lines kind of stayed where they were, so that promoted the sub-precincts to happen. So now, because I'm adding the A's, I need you guys to designate the polling locations by a vote. So that's one. So the warrant is one thing, with the date and the offices that are up, that will be on the ballot, and we'll have the constable hang them. The polling locations are located on the warrant. Those need to be voted by you guys, that's where the people will vote. And then the election workers. So this is something that needs to be done yearly. We reach out to the Democratic chair of the town Democratic Party, and we reach out to the chair of the town Republican Party. They give us a list of workers or people that are in that party that are interested in working. So sometimes they submit a list, sometimes they don't. This is a bang-up year. I got it from both of them. So these are the people that we would draw from, so that we do have options at election time, and more importantly, to keep the leadership roles a balance of power between Democrats and Republicans. So we mostly do have unenrolleds, but if we can have a Democrat-Republican, one a warden and one the clerk, it works a lot better for people who might have difficulty voting the ballot. You don't have a one-sided party telling them this is what that ballot means. So it was nice to receive that from them. So, that's the list we would work from if you vote to appoint them, which is that's what that one is. And then the polling locations and the warrant.
Awesome. Thank you, Liz. Okay, let's do the primary warrant vote first.
Motion to sign the September primary warrant.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
400. And then the election officers and polling locations.
I just want to make one point, just to have out in public record, that I do have a family member listed on the election offers. I do plan to vote, as well we're going to be voting as a block of all the members that are listed in those two.
Thanks, Ally.
So motion to appoint the list of election officers and approve the list of polling locations as presented in our packet.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
400. Thanks a lot, Liz. Appreciate it, as always. Okay, our next set of appointments have to do with capital and ARPA discussions. So this is the ongoing discussion we've been having in both, because there is a direct relationship between our capital requests and the capital budgeting process and what we need to do to be prepared for town meeting, and also the ARPA money, because if something's gonna be paid for out of ARPA, we don't wanna have to think about it in the capital side. So we think of this as part of one big process, even though the ARPA component of it is something that's controlled by the selectmen. So what we're going to do tonight is we're gonna talk about Johnson Middle School and some thoughts that I know Judy Conroy has around senior housing. So we'll, low-income housing, so we'll talk about that. Then I believe, and I know we have a bunch of the school folks here, so are we planning to talk about the high school at all, or are we just gonna defer that at this point?
We're gonna tell you that it's a priority.
Okay, all right, so we'll talk about it, but only as a priority. Okay, so we'll just wait for that point in the discussion. And then what we'll do is we're gonna have some discussion among the board members and around capital and ARPA requests in general. Jim is looking for direction from us to help move forward at least some of the ARPA spending. Again, our attitude toward this as a board, our philosophy has been that we want to be very slow-moving on this, very planful. We want to make sure we've thought about all the things we should be thinking about. And so while we might take some votes tonight on this, there would only be a few, and it'd be, my intention to continue to pump the brakes on ARPA spending so that we can continue to do proper due diligence. So that's how we're gonna go about this. So why don't we start with the Johnson Middle School, and Judy, are you gonna be yeah. So why don't you come on up to the podium and let's talk through what you're thinking.
Hi, I'm Judy Conroy. I'm an elected member of the Walpole Housing Board of, Walpole Housing Authority Board of Directors. Denise Landry is here with us tonight. She's our executive director. I killed a few trees for your pleasurable reading. So I just did a couple of handouts for you. Tonight I'd like to speak to this board about the future use of the Johnson Middle School. One of the missions of the Housing Authority is to promote affordable housing for low-income individuals, families, and veterans. During the planning stages of the new middle school project, the reuse of Johnson Middle School came into conversation. In January this year, 2022, the Housing Authority discussed and voted to endorse the authority's commitment to affordable housing opportunities within the community and to further explore the feasibility of potential housing development. There's absolutely no question that affordable housing is in high demand in Walpole, in the state, and across the country. The Johnson Middle School is an opportunity to address affordable housing in Walpole. Looking at other neighboring communities, several abandoned school buildings have been converted to housing for both affordable units at various levels of the AMI, average median income, as well as market rate units. Several years ago, the towns of Norwood, Sharon, and Natick successfully completed conversions of old schools to low-income and family housing units. Most recently, in 2022, there's a project underway in the town of Bridgewater, the McElwain School Apartment Project, which will be a mixed-use project consisting of 59 units, 57 of them affordable. I have included a list in the packet about other successful projects in Massachusetts, and some of that information also includes the project histories and their funding sources. Now, why is Johnson Middle School a great place for housing? Two things related to location. It's walkable to downtown, allowing the residents to walk to stores and services as required. It's also close to public transportation, either the train or the bus route. There are physical advantages of the building, which include the existing wide hallways, tall ceilings, and large windows, which can allow for bright, open space concepts of living. Considering the building itself is nearly 90,000 square feet, and by general classroom count as they exist today, there's a possibility of at least 40 residential units. Of course, an actual redesign of the space could potentially create additional units and possible community spaces. The third thing is the building structure. The building is solid, but as outlined by the Compass study, there are some systems requiring tremendous upgrades, which come with big price tags. The fourth reason is it's the right time. We've built a new police station, a new fire station, a senior center. The new middle school is coming. We're going to work on the high school, which is being planned for, and it's really time to put affordable senior, veteran, and family living units at the front of the line. Today, the town of Walpole has an opportunity to commit to the preservation of a town building, invest in and secure some new affordable housing with the repurpose of the Johnson Middle School. This type of project will require a significant amount of planning and coordination, and depending on the path Walpole chooses, for example, to sell or lease the building to a developer, there's a significant timeline with that. Before a decision can be made, a feasibility study specific to the Johnson Middle School building itself should be done. An RFP should be written in a way such that it would guide those interested parties and developers in the direction of what Walpole needs. For example, local preference to residents, and how many affordable units we want, and what range of affordability we would like to see, the 30 to 50% AMI. We're asking the board to strongly consider the feasibility study of the affordable housing at Johnson. And going back in time, Walpole has always been very creative in repurposing its buildings. When the new stone school was no longer needed, it became the town hall. When the old town hall was vacated, it became the police station. Not the best, but we moved it over. The purchase of an abandoned church became the Elm Street School. And now the Johnson Middle School will be empty when the new middle school is built at Byrd. It's time now again to get creative, to repurpose Johnson Middle School into affordable housing. I believe it can be done, and I believe it should be done. Tonight, I'm asking the board to appoint a Johnson Middle School repurpose subcommittee so we can take our time and not be abrupt in decision-making, to bring all the interested groups together. I'm looking also for a feasibility study and an RFP, which would require funding sources. Again, this is a huge opportunity for the town to step up and address one of the biggest issues today, and we hope this board and the community would support taking this step. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Let me open it up to board for questions. Questions from the board for Judy.
Yeah, I have a couple comments, a couple questions. That was really well thought out.
Thanks.
And I appreciate your passion for that. Thank you for the presentation. Just a couple, to clarify for me, I think I understand that you're asking for, I mean, a lot of different groups are asking for pieces of the building, but you're asking for the whole building? Is that right? Okay, just wanted to clarify. And then I've looked at some of the other projects that you have here listed, and I assume a lot of those are public-private partnerships, or?
Many of them are,
Yeah.
and I guess you would, I met with Patrick a couple of times about this, and because it's a town-owned building, and I think Denise could agree, there's no money out there for pre-development planning from DCHD or the Department of Community and Development. So what most of those towns have done is they've done their feasibility study, and they look to see what they can get, and they put out the RFP that's really tailored to specific project developers who will come in and do kind of the shoe fits.
Mm-hmm.
They've also, there's many different ways to finance. That's not my area whatsoever, so I'm not going to say, but there's local banks that have helped
Sure.
with projects.
So I think we're kind of considering two things here. One is ARPA spending and that pile of money and what we dedicated toward, and I think Johnson is one of the options. And then also, what do we do with Johnson? And then those two conversations sort of blend together. Excuse me. But in what you're describing, the scenario you're describing, would just require us to have the building and put out RFPs, but not necessarily spend any of the ARPA money as part of that process. It doesn't sound like there's any reason to spend.
Well, I mean, I'm not really clear on what your ARPA money could cover, whether
Well,
it could cover the feasibility study.
Yeah, it might, but I don't know that it's necessary to even spend ARPA money. If we could put out a request for proposal, I'm not saying we should do that, but I'm just, to talk about what you're talking about is would we need to spend any ARPA money at all to do that? I think maybe we could just decide we're gonna dedicate Johnson Middle School to either senior housing or affordable housing, and that's what it's for. And then ARPA money would be spent in other places. That's what I'm hearing.
I mean, I think study monies from ARPA would be one thing, but I wasn't ever even remotely thinking of ARPA money for the project.
I understand. Okay, so in my mind,
Let me make that clear, okay.
Those conversations were kind of blending together, so I wanted to separate those two ideas. So, but that's all. I just had those questions.
And as far as the use of the whole building, many of the projects have community spaces within them. The McKelvin School has a community center, meeting rooms, little art gallery, stuff like that, so that because it's a little bit closer to their downtown. And then as far as like I think the Compass study mentioned, like the rezoning the land, and in most of the towns, the communities welcome the rezoning just so that the abandoned buildings get repurposed.
I'm sorry, I do want to just finish by saying I do support the concept of affordable housing and senior housing and improving a situation in Walpole, and whether or not it's at Johnson or elsewhere, I support the concept. So I just want to say that, make that point. Okay.
Thanks. Ally?
Thank you for coming tonight, and this is great information. I recently did tour Johnson again, and I think what will we do with Johnson is going to be a number of people coming together to discuss it, because I don't think there's a clear answer just yet of what we can do with that building. Reiterate, Gwen said, I support affordable housing, and if Johnson is a place and that works, wonderful. If it's something else, somewhere else, I would support that as well. I think the town does need to take action in creating some more affordable housing for our seniors and veterans and have a plan of where that will be. So I think a subcommittee of feasibility studies, I do think those would be worthwhile to really kind of invest a little bit more, because I think Johnson, it's really unclear what can we do with that building and what is going to have the best home there.
Thanks, Ally. Mark?
Yeah, I would follow up on that. I think that affordable housing is a viable option for the Johnson building and site. Having said that, I don't think we've really explored what the other uses are. But I think housing is a viable solution, and we should continue to look at that. So the first question I have for Jim is, based on our agreement with MSBA, or whatever it's now called, could we sell the building? Like, I remember there being some clauses in the agreement that we can't sell it maybe during the financing. I don't remember what it was, but there was some restriction on.
We did some digging on that one.
Okay.
Initially, the answer was, no, you can't sell it. But after working with council and Compass, and putting some feelers out to MSBA, the answer wasn't no. It was, yes, you could sell it. They may ask for a portion of it, 37%. I don't have a definitive answer on that. But the answer right now is, informally, is yes. If we do pursue this, I want it in writing, but that's where I stand right now.
So the other question I would have is, how are these old schools having been financed? So, if we decided we wanted to use Johnson for affordable housing or Walpole Housing Authority or whatever entity would control it, how are those buildings financed? Does the town enter into an agreement with a private developer where the town provides the site and the building and they provide the conversion, and then who would run it? So I'd like to know more about what are really the options if we were trying to get down that housing path. And obviously, can't get that answer tonight, and we're not gonna get that answer quickly, but it would be nice for us to know a lot more about that pathway as a real viable option, and I think it is a viable option. But I think there are other viable options too, so.
Just looking through briefly the packet you handed out.
Right.
You
The
know,
mech-
so it seems like a mixture, a little
It
bit.
is a mix, because like you can't look at Norwood. Norwood came in, I couldn't find a date, so I faked it and said 1979. But it was there when I worked at the hospital, so the Shine project, and they turned the Shattuck School into 17 units. So don't go dig and fact check the Norwood, the Norwood line. But the McKellen School in Braintree, in Bridgewater, the financing was, they have CPA in Bridgewater. You have the Community Preservation Act, this Life Initiative pre-development financing, not a clue what that is. Needham Bank financing, and additional state and federal subsidies, and they also, it's already ongoing, but this might have been old information, construction and permanent debt financing to be determined. So it was the developer that handled the financing, and I believe in Bridgewater, they declared surplus, had been abandoned for like 13 years. I saw in downtown Bridgewater, they sold the building to the developer, who obviously the RFP, which I have copies of, I can get one to Jim, I didn't want to kill more trees. And that's basically what they did. They sold it to the developer for a price. Developer was responsible for all the conversion, et cetera. But the good mix was, they did put an addition on. I don't know how many units were in that, but a total of 59 units, 57 are affordable. Now, what I couldn't dig in, I didn't get to dig into whether it's 50% AMI or 80%, but that's a big percentage of affordable units and local preference to people that live in Bridgewater. So, I mean, there's things you can put into your RFP that the developers don't mind, but obviously for financial reasons, there's a make or break point for them, you know. But, I mean, Capstone is doing Bridgewater. There's another company, Penrose. I mean, there's multiple firms that do this kind of work. Not only with schools, they do the mill buildings, the abandoned buildings in Boston. You know, they want their gold seal, blue ribbon awards, you know, so they take them on. But,
Thanks.
okay.
Very
all right.
informative.
So the other thing
It would be
like I
good to
said,
find out more.
yeah, so I mean, I know you just talked earlier about, you know, making these decisions, you know, at a snail's pace, but, and I'm not anxious. I was anxious that you might be making some decisions without the information on how a housing project could go.
Yeah, we've, you know, we've been very intentional about, you know, setting aside time to have people like yourself come in, talk to us. You know, we've had multiple meetings on this, and this is, you know, the opportunity that we've set aside for you to come in and put on the table what you're thinking. And I very much appreciate it. And again, I think you did a very nice job presenting that. Glenn said that earlier, and I'd agree with that. I have a couple of quick questions for you, and maybe you don't know the answers, but at some point I'll want to understand this. So could you spend just 60 seconds and tell the board and whoever happens to be watching what the current state of affairs is with the low and moderate income housing under the control of Walpole Housing Authority today?
Okay, that would be a 60-second answer from Denise.
Well, and the reason
But I
I'm
mean,
asking is because I'd like
there's
to.
a need, there's a definite need.
Yeah.
We definitely need more family housing.
How many units do we have today in
100
Walpole?
and, Denise, 100 and,
Walpole Housing Authority
Yeah.
portfolio. We have 118 one-bedroom senior disabled units. We have 12 units of family housing, 6 two-bedrooms, 6 three-bedroom. We also run subsidy programs, but site-based, that's basically what we own today.
And how does that compare to other towns? Is that,
well, we're a small housing authority.
Small to medium
Yeah.
housing authority.
yeah,
And it runs the gamut from, Boston Housing Authority, for instance, but for suburban, we're considered small to medium.
and that's really the point I wanted to bring out is the number of units you have. I just added up 130 in my head as you were going through that. And the size of, what the Walpole Housing Authority does, perhaps compared to other towns of a similar size, my impression is that it's smaller than many of the other communities, and therefore the need. Okay, so that's where I'm trying to connect there for you. The second question that I had was around, you've used multiple terms as you went through this. You've talked about affordable housing. which in my mind might be something that is outside the purview of the Walpole Housing Authority.
Correct.
And then there's within the purview of the Walpole Housing Authority. So is the within the purview of the Walpole Housing Authority part of your thought processes, or is it more the affordable?
It's both.
Okay.
So like, as I mentioned, 30% AMI is basically what our population is in the housing authority today.
Okay.
Um,
Correct. The threshold for eligibility. within
Denise,
our
could you just come up to the mic? I'd like people to hear what you're saying. Yeah.
The threshold for eligibility within our site-based properties is 80% of median. However, the population that we service is significantly below that. So our target population, or our mission statement, so to speak, right now, we're looking at 30 to 50% AMI in who we want to service for our families.
Okay. And so what that then leads us to is on those two paths, Walpole Housing Authority versus, sell to a developer. If you go down the Walpole Housing Authority path, one of the things that I'd like to understand is what the financing opportunities are that might come from the state itself, because you are a state authority. And so I'd be very interested in knowing what the state would bring to the game here. And I don't even know really how to ask that question properly, but I think you get the sense of what, anything that is, housing authority, financing options, what might those look like, I think is important. And then when you go the other way on the affordable housing, I'm thinking you're saying that's more turnkey. So we would sell the building, a developer would buy the building for us, and they would take it from there, including selling the units and so forth.
Right, but they would, with the RFP and with the contract that they are, agreeing to, there would be certain units that would be 30% to 50%.
Okay.
There
Yep.
might be, I think in Sharon at the Wilbur School, I think they don't tell you how many 50%
Right,
AMIs are in there,
yeah.
but they have them.
Would
So that would
those,
be something that would be like, under, with the purchase and sales, you will.
yeah. Would those fall under the purview of the Walpole Housing Authority, or would they stay under whatever the other?
They would stay under the developer's
Developer,
real estate
okay.
management firm, but they would have to follow the same guidelines that Denise and her
Yeah.
staff follow.
There's the days of the comprehensive grant where the state gave you the grant award to develop your housing, those are gone.
Yeah, okay,
The scenarios now in mixed finance, private, public relationships, way beyond my bailiwick. These are careers that people
Mhm.
entertain.
Consultants.
Consultants, yes. So, again, they would toggle together, and what I've seen, just, from general reading, is they toggle together a variety of different revenue streams in order to make the development numbers work. Again, they have to support the tax, they have tax credits, they have different programmatic, various funding streams. And then they would make the pro forma work depending on, the cost to develop the site or redevelop the site. There's a variety of ways that people do it, they're creative, you hear about them all the time, but you can maintain the ground, land lease the building, you can dispose of it. Again, you also have to entertain a procurement process, and that's a whole nother, area of expertise that you have to go down. But the opportunity, and I'm sure Jim probably can speak to this much better than I, but you would have to divest of the land, you would have to land lease the land, you would develop your RFP, and these are all down the road. Determinations would happen after you decided that that's the route you wanted to take this building.
okay.
So it's all part of the formula to get there.
And
So,
Excuse me, and I think the project in Bridgewater, I think if I read correctly, it was about a 2-year process
Yeah.
before, groundbreaking,
okay.
which took place last spring.
Well, the good news here is that, the Johnson Middle School is not even gonna be available for some other reuse for a couple
That's
years.
why we're getting in line.
So, what I think, and Glenn, you hit on this, that there are, and we all know this, there are many different groups that are interested in the building. Jim, one of the things that we had talked about some months ago, as we started to think ahead to, Johnson and how we might figure this out. And you mentioned it in your opening remarks, Judy, is to put some kind of a reuse committee together to evaluate the multiple options that we might have. I kind of like that idea, because what I'd like to do is get, we've got the schools, we got the rec, we got the housing authority. There may be others too that are interested in it. It might even be, hey, office space is the best use for it and gets the best with it. It might be something like that. But I do think it might be valuable, given that we have the time, to get some kind of a process together. I think it needs to be, and I'd be interested in others' views on the board here, but I kind of think we need to have some professional involvement in it. This can't be
absolutely.
just a bunch of people come together in town and, all with good intention, but try to sort this out. I think we've got to, there must be some professional advice we could get on how to run a process like this, how to take a look at the various options A, B, C, D, and say, look, from the town's point of view, here's the way to think about the A, B, C, D, and make that come together over the next year or so, and then be in a position to make a choice. So, Jim, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, or if you had evolved that thought process any further.
So I had some questions. Some of them were
feel free.
answered.
Yeah.
So one of the notes I wrote down, 40B versus Section 8, you guys, what's being proposed right now is more of it's not going to be owned by the housing authority. Town, you figure it out, go partner with a developer, do something simple. I'd probably go to Bridgewater. I think I might know their town administrator over there. Go that route. The housing authority is not looking to have any ownership of this, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So would the housing authority be able to kick in some funds for, one, a feasibility study, two, for us to enlist the services of a professional firm, as Jim mentioned? Right now, tomorrow, we're meeting with the Peregrine Group to discuss that other project. I think it was the Old Town Hall. Yes, Old Town Hall. So I think you're kind of alluding to it, something like
Yeah,
that.
similar.
With the housing authority, we don't have an appropriation at this time. Does the housing authority have
We
anything?
don't have an appropriation.
Kick in.
That's the dilemma.
Okay. Any idea what the cost of the feasibility study would be? Okay.
No. You guys own the building. You've done feasibility studies before.
What
What's an
would,
average feasibility study cost?
Walpole Housing Authority, I saw the vote from, I think it was back in January, supportive in pursuing it. But is the housing authority looking to take any type of leadership role on this one, or?
If you're going to create a task force, I'm on it.
Be on it. And what role would the housing authority look to play in all this, or just help to kind of facilitate this along? Or?
I think to help to facilitate it along. It's kind of, I've shown up the last 3 or 4 open forums to
You're going
kind
to
of
be on
get
too many committees,
things.
Judy.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. No, but one last thing before you have your last say. I think you have to have a vision, and most people have a vision of it can't be done. I have a vision that things can be done. So I would hope that at some point, when the task force gets together, and, it's amicable, and we have a point system to figure out who's gonna have the best draw, but I really see that as a wonderful location for affordable housing for Walpole. And I don't know if anyone would, aside from some random thing that makes it absolutely impossible, I don't know anyone that haven't spoken to anyone that has said that's a really stupid idea. I mean, I think it's good. I mean, whoever thought a church would be a school, right, guys? In 1997, we bought a church and we made it into an elementary school. And we would never have built another elementary school, guaranteed. So that's where I'm coming from,
So as far
past
as
experience.
the group, I would, if the board, we did talk about, we laid out some options. I remember putting the slide together. If we did put some type of group together, I would ask that, it be kept to a manageable number, 7 at the most, I know we've done 15, and, I'm thinking of the council on aging, we've actually had to trim that back, but I'd ask the board to give me a manageable number to work with.
The group is not just for the housing, but for the use of the school.
Repurpose of
Yeah.
the,
Repurposing
oh,
of
I
the
understand
school.
that,
Yeah, whatever
yeah. I
direction
mean, we
that
just want
might
to
go,
have
yeah.
a spoon in the
I
pot,
understand. Okay,
I
gotcha.
think it would be important to have someone represented from every area to make sure that all points of view were taken, and, into the meetings. So housing authority, schools, rec department, as you know, Jim mentioned a professional point, because sometimes a committee can get kind of veered off track and really focus in on one area, but I think it really needs to be vetted out for all purposes.
I guess I'm just picturing what happens at this committee. If Judy is on the committee and she knows what she wants the school to be, she's gonna spend all the time talking about housing and affordable housing. And if maybe the school representatives on the committee, they're gonna spend all that time talking about maybe, kindergarten classrooms. And so a committee of single interest, like concerns, all going in 7 different directions doesn't seem like a productive use of a committee.
Well-
I'm not saying there isn't a better way. You have something to say?
I mean, I think if there's a task force and it's an obviously appointed by your board, I think it would give that group an opportunity to invite people in the business to come and speak to them.
Okay.
Whether it be and I'm sure that they would want to, or, there might be folks in town that are in that business. I have no idea. They would say, I can help you out with the repurposed
Well, I also think that
situation.
if we were to go down this path, the charge to that group would be specific. You've got to go look at this, 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 and this. And the output of that group needs to be those 5 thises I just had, and what the cost benefits are, and so forth.
Exactly.
That leads you to a more fact-based decision, one that, and I want to say this the right way, but one that works out in the best interest of the town of Walpole.
Exactly. I mean, I get it.
Yeah.
Housing might not be the best thing for that place.
Or it could be.
It could be the best or it could not
We
be.
don't know, but I think that would be what I would expect, Glenn, is we give them a very specific charge, so this isn't, go forth and conjure. This is go look at these things under the guidance of some group, I don't know what group it would be, but some professional group that does this, and you've got, 90 days to go do it, and here's the output. And then come back and report to us, which then gives us the ability to then say, okay, you eliminate these, you get down to 2 maybe, and then you take those 2 forward and really think those through. That's the way I would envision the process working.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm sure it would work.
Make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Jim, I guess, we're not gonna figure this out right now, but I guess in an upcoming meeting, the next one or the one after, perhaps, we should put another agenda item on to talk about how we might put a group like that together, what it might look like in terms of who a professional organization to help facilitate that process for the group might look like, and then make a decision sometime in September and get that group going. Because if it is, I don't know how long it is, 90 days, 6 months, whatever it turns out to be, we have that time right now, and we, again, following our mantra of being very planful here, if it's the middle of next year when we sort this out, that's not a problem, because the middle school's not close to, being, ready.
First class is gonna be in there in the fall of '24, so
Yeah.
we have time. Yeah.
Plenty of time, then we go down the RFP path and all that kind of stuff.
But
So
as I'm realizing, being on the 300th committee, that time is ticking away.
I know.
it is, well,
It's the same year,
You'll be back to talk to us about that shortly, too. So-
Yeah, I know we will be. Not me, someone else. But
All right,
anyway.
anything else before we wrap?
No, I just appreciate your time. I know I've been bugging you, but I just feel very passionate about it, because I have that vision. I'm seeing it, so I just want to keep
No,
things
and
moving.
I appreciate your persistence.
I'll be
and-
persistent, I
And
will.
knowing that we were going to see you again at Open Forum this week,
I don't have to come.
I said we best bet put Judy on the agenda, so. So, thank you.
Thank you
Denise,
very much.
Thank
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'd like to switch the discussion now to the schools. I see the superintendent here, Dr. Goff. I see members of the school committee, so I don't know who's going to address this, but why don't you come on up and let's talk about what your thoughts are. And it's okay to swerve into the middle school, the Johnson Middle School lane as well. I'm looking to get your views on where you're trying to go with some things, so we can set the overall course and direction, okay?
Sure. Well, First of all, we basically prepared to talk to you about capital and ARPA and building projects. And we really appreciate the opportunity. We were here about, I don't know, 6 or 8 weeks ago when you were talking about ARPA, and we're just glad that we got the invite to come back. We have Dr. Goff and Mr. Frisha and Mr. Ahern here, each of whom have a little bit more specific expertise than I do. The members of the school committee that aren't here are listening at home, including our chairperson, Kristen, who is out of town. But, you know, we want to stay in touch with you, I guess is what I'm getting at. I'm going to give an overview, and then the rest of the team is going to be willing to answer any questions that you have. So when we left the last time, we thought that we heard that there's a limited amount of money, and I think it was 9 or 10 times as many dollars as available. So we were supposed to prioritize. And essentially, what we did is we shortened our year one list, but it does include some very big ticket items. We really need the $880,000 of system-wide technology that is on our capital budget list. That would be our number one item. This comes up every 3 years so that we can keep most of our devices on a 6-year replacement cycle. This dollar amount is larger than usual because of the large spike in technology costs, but also because COVID accelerated our district's need to become a district that has a device for every student. So that's our number one priority, and it's on the capital budget request list. Our number two priority is very closely followed by our number three priority. In some ways, they're basically tied. But we would be asking for $3 million for the schematic design cost related to a building project at Walpole High School. It would address the most pressing needs, but we're not requesting this until the spring because the construction market is just so crazy right now, as we're learning from the middle school. And we really feel strongly that we need to ensure that the middle school project is done well and that we deliver the product that the voters expect us to. So second priority, $3 million for schematic design, but not until the springtime. The third priority is $3 million of contingency money for the middle school project if we need it. Currently, we're at the point where the architectural design is 60% complete. And due to the current market, we have to consider some serious cutbacks while still facing 2 more potential points where additional cuts may be made. It's really not the time to panic, but we are asking both you and we've reached out to our state legislators to try to set aside funding that we could access if needed when we really have to settle in on what the cuts are. Our next vote specific to that is next Tuesday night. Then our fourth priority is one that needs some long-term planning, and it would be the construction cost related to a building project at Walpole High School. We're not looking for any money this year, but that is our next big priority. We estimate the actual request for this funding to be at least a year away, but it's an important priority to us. Our fifth priority is $1 million to do as much HVAC replacement work at Walpole High School as possible. We believe that this particular request meets the portion of the ARPA funding that is very limited and specific in its regulations, and it would let us begin to address the most troublesome parts of the building in terms of air quality, but especially the heat during the months of August, September, and June, while also making progress towards electrifying some of our school's HVAC system. So third priority is $1 million. We feel like we can make some significant progress at Walpole High School, and rather than spreading it out among the buildings, we feel like it's smarter to do one school at a time. The middle school will be climate controlled when it's built, and Elm Street School is already air conditioned. So while we initially gave you a much longer capital budget list, we understand the need to prioritize, and we will move the remaining items into future years' requests. Among the more notable item is the reuse of Johnson for preschool students. We still have a significant concern about enrollment at the preschool, but we cannot make this a priority above the others. We'll have to find some short-term solutions for now, and we are open to the use of Johnson in the future, but the more we discuss it, the more we realize it would require some serious money in order to turn it into a preschool. So this area is one that we intend to continue discussion with your board as the year progresses. But we're not prioritizing it right now. Beyond this, there are other requests that we will have to push into next year. So that's our priority summary. We appreciate the opportunity, and Bridget, Mike, Sean, and I will answer any questions that you guys have.
Great, thanks, Nancy.
Sure.
How many of these items are on the capital plan, the capital budget plan?
All of them except for we're adding the $3 million for contingency at the middle school.
Okay.
But all the others were on the plan for year one as a long set of requests.
And how long have they been on, and what's the likelihood of them seeing funding anytime soon?
Which ones, Jim?
The ones that are on the actual capital budget list. So we have a capital budget process, we have a list. Capital Budget Committee reviews the list, and, you know, we set priorities and take those to town meeting. I'm trying to get a sense for where these are in that process.
So as this process has evolved and we've started to talk about ARPA as well as capital,
Yeah.
we've revised our capital list that's reflected in front of you tonight. That would be our capital / ARPA list for this year, year one of that 5-year plan.
So does the Capital Budget Committee have these?
So the capital budget committee has what we originally had as a capital list, or actually, I don't even think they have it yet. It hasn't been sent to them yet.
Okay.
So we're revising this as we move along. As these discussions evolve, our list has evolved slightly.
The reason I'm asking is I'm trying to figure out where some of these, because some of these feel like they really just ought to be on the capital budget side of the house as opposed to ARPA. And obviously, this is way more than even we have in ARPA. So you're gonna need to get things done through the capital budget process. So I'm just trying to get a sense for where we are in that thought process and how that then would perhaps impact how you're thinking about these priorities. Because, you know, if you think about it, you would have to draw the line on this thing not higher than number 2, right? You'd have to, and probably only number 1. So, you know, I don't know, from ARPA I'm talking about.
Right.
So I don't know, I just want to make sure that these things are actually in the capital budget process and that they're working their way through, because it can take 3 to 5 years to actually make your way through that process.
I think the items that are on this list that would be traditional capital that we've used in the past
Yeah.
would be the 3-year technology plan. That's
Yeah.
a new start to that. And probably something like the HVAC installation at Walpole High School would be traditional items that we've funded through capital or requested, and in some cases funded. I think the other items are based on the discussion tonight about ARPA, some additional funding that's out there. So we're presenting what the school committee believes is the priorities of significant projects that wouldn't normally be on a capital list.
Gotcha, okay. I probably have some more questions, but let me open it up to the board. Other questions from the board? Go ahead.
Sorry, I just jump in there first, but I want to get it off my chest. So I do see, I'm talking about the 3-year technology plan. That's $880,000 over 3 years, so that would be divided by 3. That cost, it's not $880,000 per year, correct?
Correct.
It's $880,000 total over 3 years.
Right.
And so you're not asking for 880, you'd be asking for a third of that.
That's correct.
This year. Okay, and that is on the capital plan, and it makes
Can I
sense.
just add something there?
Yeah, go ahead.
Glenn? We've done it 2 different ways.
Mhm.
And we've just done it based on what was available and what was recommended or what we worked out with the town administration. So in some cases, the decision was made, just give us the full amount in 1 year. and it was on us to manage it over 3 years. Or, in another scenario, the money is divided up, not necessarily exactly evenly,
Sure.
but divided over the 3 years.
Sure, I think it's more appealing to divide it up personally. I just think it's more manageable. There are so many other competing priorities on here that $200,000 is much more manageable, or $250 is much more manageable than $880. That's just my position on that. It still allows us to buy the computers and implement the technology plan, and it almost puts us on a path where we've almost committed that year 2 is going to be the second third, and year three would be the final piece. So I do like the idea of it's a manageable number, especially if you divide it by 3. I like the idea of attacking that 3-year technology plan at a 1/3 rate, and possibly out of ARPA if we need to, and if we do it out of the capital budget, that's fine too. And I do think there's room in ARPA for schematic design for the high school. It doesn't, in my mind, it doesn't have to be the full $3 million. I think we could take a piece of ARPA, and maybe it's $1.5 million, maybe it's $2 million. But again, a chunk of ARPA, instead of spreading it really thin over 20 different projects, we have a real meaningful impact on the high school design and really move that project forward and really commits us to that project. And I think ARPA is a good way to go about it. So I do agree with you that it's hard to get much further down the list, but that is what capital is for, and I think that those projects won't be ignored, but they'll just have to be done in a different way.
Exactly, yep. Ally?
Yeah, thank you for the list and thank you for the update. I'm sitting here comparing and highlighting kind of what is currently on the capital, what do we have in ARPA, so this list with everything included, and the technology that does need to be replaced. That is a commitment we have to our students, that we've been utilizing that technology. So, and that is typically always on our capital budget, every 3 years. That is technology that we need to do replacing. The schematic design for Walpole High School and the middle school, those two are very difficult because they're both big kind of chunks of money. The last meeting for the middle school building, the cuts that were being looked at to get the project in line, budgetary-wise, are difficult. I'm concerned with not where the building is going, but I'm concerned that the design plan does not change too much, so that the building itself is what was promised, is what is designed, and the things that we can add in later, we attack that later. But making sure that we maintain the space that the design of the middle school is, and that we're not cutting classroom space or anything to remain on budget is important. So for me, the contingency money and get this middle school project done and done correctly is a little bit higher than the schematic design, but they're both very important, and we do need to be, thinking of the future of the high school as the needs of that school are changing as well.
Mark?
Yeah, and I think, the 3-year technology plan is kind of a no-brainer. We should just continue down the path we've been on. I think it's done so much for the kids, especially through COVID, to be able to have laptops. And, now everybody can have one and use one all the time. So I think that's a no-brainer. 2 and 3, the schematic design for the high school and the middle school contingency, I think they're sort of tied together. And I like the idea of don't do anything right now with that. Let's push it and have this conversation again in a few months. And you can get a little further with the school building planning process and see where you stand. We still have contingency money, and yet we're making cuts to, or what do they call it, value engineering. So you're trading out this for that, and hopefully you're not doing anything major in terms of the space. You can keep your flexibility. But it would be good for you I'd feel more comfortable if you got further down that pathway so that we know if we do need some contingency money. And if we do, I think the ARPA money is a real option. So, and if we get a little bit further over the next 90 days or however long you think it will take, and we don't need that contingency money, I'm also a big proponent of the middle school, design. I'd like to really see, the high school design, I'd really like to see some of the improvements we all know are needed there to be done. So I'm comfortable thinking of them as sort of one unit. We're gonna push a little bit down the road and come back and revisit. So those are my priorities, so.
Glenn?
Can I make just a follow-up comment? Because I think you actually made some news tonight and if we had a newspaper in Walpole, it might be on the front page, that you're not really interested in Johnson Middle School as your top 9 priorities anymore. You want to kind of push that off. And to me, that was one of the more exciting topics that we were going to talk about, but it sounds like you've had a lot of conversations within. And so I just wanted to talk about that a little bit more. Maybe could you expound upon that? Because I kind of thought we were going to talk about, there were some ideas out there, such as maybe we merge the kindergarten classrooms all over at Johnson. Maybe we expand the wonderful Feeney School program, and we have space now at this great new school that we can renovate. And it doesn't sound like you're as excited as I am about that anymore. And that's okay. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
No, I think it was just, it's a reality check.
Okay.
I think the concern about taking on too much is what we talked about last week as a school committee. And we want to do the middle school right. Like, that is our biggest priority right now, even ahead of the high school. But when it came to it, we said middle school, high school, preschool, it's in that order. And we didn't feel like it was our job to get into saying which things fit in the ARPA category versus which ones fit in the capital category, or which ones are going to be done through the debt schedule and borrowing. We just had a list of things that we had been talking about with you over the last few months, and we just wanted to prioritize them. If money wasn't such an issue, we would be very interested, and we are going to need a solution to the fact that the preschool numbers are growing. And it's a good thing that kids with special needs are surviving birth, and there are more and more of them that we have to serve. And the school is at above capacity right now. I think our conversation was, we just have to be aware of the money of it. And if retrofitting Johnson to become a preschool costs more than putting portable classrooms onto the Elm Street School, we would be open to a solution. We're interested and wouldn't want to dismiss Johnson by any means, but we know there are competing needs for it. And from the school department's point of view, am I saying that right? That middle school and high school, in that order, have to be even higher than.
Sure, and I do understand that. Where I'm coming from is my concern is that if we don't take the opportunity with APA, where we have this money that's not earmarked for anything, because all these things on your list are going to get done. We're gonna find a way to, middle school contingency. We're gonna find a way to do that. I know it's going to be a challenge, and we need to maybe go slow for that reason, so we can find out how challenging it's going to be. We're going to fix the HVAC, and we're going to get a traffic light at Elm Street. It might not be in 1 year, it might not be in 2 years, but it's going to happen. I find my thought is that if we put on the shelf the expansion of the Feeney School, for example, that the appetite is going to go away. And I don't know if that's true. It sounds like what you're saying is that's not necessarily true. So I'm glad that you're saying that. I just want to sort of emphasize that I don't want it to go away if we do put it on the shelf. And I do want to maybe look at the possibility of doing it without doing an overhaul of Johnson Middle School. It is a school right now, right? So possibly it doesn't need millions of dollars worth of renovations. Possibly.
Well, you have to look at it from the point of view of it, at the very, very least. The stairs for little ones, the staircases are a problem, the bathrooms are a problem. And then you have to look at all the other kinds of safety things.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I don't know, I just think that I don't know, we didn't know enough, and we felt like we were doing what we were asked to do, to prioritize
My thought is I
it.
just want to explore it a little bit further.
And I'm glad you're giving us the chance, Glenn, because it's not that we don't care about it, we do.
I
The
believe that,
problem
yeah.
is that, we know that there's a limited amount of money, and we're asking for big chunks of money.
You are.
And it would be good, we'll know more about the middle school in a few months.
Okay.
And like I said, we've reached out to the state legislature because we're not the only ones who have hit this like snag in the construction market. So maybe there's another source of funding. We actually did get some funding through the state budget, I forgot to mention it, for HVAC at Walpole High School. There's, you know, because we're always trying to figure out where we could get some money, but in the budget that just got approved, I'm pretty sure there's 350,000 of HVAC money coming to us for
That's
improvements.
great news.
So yeah, if I'm making sense, I'm not sure.
You are. I think we'll know more as the year and the years go on, so, yeah.
So, you did exactly what we asked you to do, which is
Okay.
give us the priority, so really appreciate that. My concern is now starting to think about funding source, okay? And knowing that, you know, ARPA funds are scarce, it's important to get these into the capital budgeting process. Mike, sounds like you've done that, so that's gonna be very important. I agree with Mark that the three-year technology plan is critically important. Glenn said the same thing, and so we need to make sure that's covered somewhere, okay? And I think the capital budget process is the place for that, in all truth. So I'd ask you to really make sure that we don't end up with a gap there, okay? Then I really think we have to understand the state of affairs with the middle school, because, and Ally said it well, you know, we committed a certain amount of capability with the building. We want to deliver that to the fullest extent that we possibly can. So I think letting a few more months go by so you can get to the 80% and the 90% design views and really have a much better sense of what, you know, cuts might be required, just giving all the challenges around building stuff right now. I think it'll be smart for us to defer some of this discussion until we understand that better, and then figure out how we're gonna, you know, close down some of those gaps, because there are some things that we should just not be willing to eliminate from that project, okay? Now, we all know that some things are gonna get eliminated. I mean, this has been the history of any project we've ever done, whether it's the fire station, the police station, the senior center, the high school, the Elm Street School, whatever it's been. We've always had to make choices as you go along, and I'm sure that will be the case here. And we should be doing that, but to the extent that it's something that really needs to be in there, we want to fight for that. So I think the sense from the board here, that at least that I have, is let's, and again, we're going slow, so it's not like we're at any risk here, we're going slow. Let's get through the end of the year, see where we really stand with the middle school, and then start thinking about, you know, how ARPA might play into that to help close down some of those gaps. And if there aren't any, for some miraculous reason, then now you can start thinking more about the designs for the high school. So I think that's the right approach here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that matches with exactly
Good.
what we were trying to
Perfect, okay.
accomplish. Yep.
Okay, good. Well, this is great. So thank you for coming in and talking to us. I appreciate that very much. Yeah, oh, sure, absolutely, Bridget.
I just wanted to thank Ally for all the time and all the hard work of coming down to the preschool and the middle school just to find out some more information about it and looking at, you know, what the cost could be versus knowing that we need for it, but exactly what Nancy said. So I appreciate you, you know, doing that homework, and thank you for taking the time.
I greatly support, you know, the Daniel Feeney preschool, and people have to understand that the preschool, the base is that we provide services for children with special needs, and that is the state mandate. When children turn 3, Walpole has to provide an education and provide an appropriate place for that education. And I want to be very thoughtful as we expand Daniel Feeney that how we expand is for the preschool population. And for me, Johnson, I'm not sure on that. I think it would be very costly to make that into a preschool environment. But again, Johnson needs a lot more thought, as we've talked about earlier tonight.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So I want to close out this part of the conversation by just touching on sewer and water, because we do have requests from sewer and water. Here's my thought. I think we ought to have the sewer and water commissioners come back in again, perhaps in the 8:23 meeting. I'd like to talk about a couple things. The Willis water treatment membrane. which I believe is their number one priority, but I want to confirm that with them and have them make sure they tell us that. That's number one. I also want to talk about Morningside Drive, and the reason for that is because we have used that as part of the discussion around the rate setting. And I want to come back around on that. And again, the board can decide to go in different direction, that's fine by me, but I want to make sure we've had that with them and close out that part of the conversation. I also think it's going to be important before we actually vote those items that we have all 5 members present here, just because I think these ARPA funds are so important to the town that we want to have the full board here. So, Jim, if that works for you, if we could just push this part of the discussion out to 8:23 and have the water and sewer commissioners come in, I think that's the best thing to do.
Yeah, it does, but it's about the latest. I need some direction from your board.
Okay.
Because there's a fair amount of capital requests on the table. On the water side, it's 4.7 million, and on the sewer side, it's $9.8 million. So obviously, that's gonna impact whatever you may fund out of ARPA. I can at least take off capital.
Right.
And figure out how I can fund some of these items through retained earnings. I'm not looking to take on any additional borrowing this town meeting, because I want to try to save on the borrowing for a little bit, because we are going out next week likely, and I need to begin to save for the high school project whenever that may come. So just, I need some direction by the 23rd, so.
Okay.
Can I inquire about the
Go ahead.
borrowing? So I understand we're not looking to borrow, but how about the water, out of the water and sewer budget, they have an enterprise fund. So is there any reason to not borrow out of the enterprise fund?
Some of these projects are, honestly, there's a $6.3 million project in there and a $3.1 million project.
Can't, retained earnings isn't gonna cover any of that.
I honestly think we need to plan. Those projects weren't on the 5-year plan, the 6.3 and 3.1 as quickly as they have been right now.
Yeah.
And we need some planning to go into that, similar to what we've done with the high school. So we just
Okay.
need some years
I
to
mean,
build
retained
up.
earnings and APA is still not gonna, like,
Yeah,
I mean, they need to be committed to the possibility of borrowing, and
but we need to build up their debt capacity a little bit. If
out of
that's
the
what,
enterprise fund?
yeah, somehow budget for that.
Okay.
I need to know that that's what they want to do.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons it would be great if we could meet with sewer and water, and having them at the next meeting would be great.
Yeah.
It may also be great to try to do a workshop in the fall, because I'd love to know more about, as they look at all their capital needs, looking forward for 10 or 15 years, what are they thinking about their ability to do that, and do they need to grow the enterprise fund, all those kind of things. And, you know, I know that they're a board, they're their own entity, they can literally decide to do whatever they want, but I'd love to know more. I think we can be more supportive if we know more, and we can also decide if we want to commit some ARPA money to help give them a little jump start. So anything we do to build a good relationship there and, you know, talk more, especially on the capital side, would be great.
I just want to go on record and maybe repeat myself, but I'm concerned about not borrowing for water main replacement, for example. I mean, is it a good idea? I think if Rick was here, a DPW director or a water superintendent, they would tell us that it's not necessarily a good idea to be skipping years on the water main replacement, because we're not replacing all the mains, we're replacing as much as we can afford to. And the only time that I can remember that we skipped a year was during COVID, because we were worried about what the economy was going to do, and we needed to catch up for that. So I feel like kicking the can down the road on infrastructure projects, when I was on the Water Commission, I was advised that that was a very bad idea. And I think as a general policy, I agree that kicking the can down the road on important infrastructure projects is a bad idea. So I am not as, I do want to build up the debt budget limit out of the enterprise fund, but I don't want to kick the can down the road on water main replacement comes to mind, and some other important projects.
I was more or less talking about the $6.3 million request for the sewer line expansion.
Oh, okay.
That's-
But the other ones, we're not going to borrow for anything, it sounds like, necessarily.
I think you need to have a conversation with the commissioners
I think
as
so
far as
too,
the
yeah.
redundant line for the central storage. That's the old PR tank. And I think Bill Abbott, when he's before you a few meetings ago, explained the importance of that.
Sure.
If they want to borrow for it, we need to do a really deep dive as far as whether or not they can afford it, given the current rate structure.
Right, I think they think APA's going to come to the rescue, and I don't know, and maybe APA has some money for them, but it's not going to fund a $3 million central storage tank.
And that's
redundancy.
third on their priority.
Yeah, it's not, I mean, maybe there's money there, but there's not that much money there. And so I'm concerned with the lack of action, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. So, yeah, they should come in and we should have that conversation.
And as far as some of the items that were discussed here with the school department, I was aware of some of these items, not all of them. I know some of them, I think we can make some of these items work. I think their willingness to work with us as far as items such as the HVAC installation at the high school. There's some opportunities there through the Green Communities grant projects that we've been working on. We're closing out the street projects, the street light projects, and there's gonna likely be another round of grants in February that we'll be eligible for. David Ruggiero, our Green Communities Coordinator, is working on setting up something. This would be ideal to use a combination of ARPA funds and Green Communities funds on it. And it might be as much as $2 million if we grow the Green Communities route, but it will save us in the long run. So I have somewhat of a plan in the back of my mind. If we have, I believe it's until 2024 to commit these ARPA funds. I think it's either 25 or 26 they have to get spent by. So we do have some time. But these projects, the reason I'm here tonight is to talk more or less, these two lists are gonna impact one another. So, if I cover, the HVAC system over on ARPA, I don't have to worry about it on capital. So that's kind of on my radar. Some of these I do have a plan on. The technology plan I've discussed with the superintendent as far as phasing that in, because to me, it's similar to a cruiser. We budget for a cruiser each year in the police department budget. Some years they ask for two, and I have to cut it, but we know this is an ongoing expense. If we could phase that cost in for the school department, maybe do 300 this year through capital, when they're budgeting for setting their FY24 budget, they budget at least 100. We fund another 200 through capital next year, and then just slowly phase it in, because the superintendent and I have talked about it, because it's silly for them to keep coming forward when we know it's an ongoing need for the school department. COVID helped us immensely. They gave us free Chromebooks for all the kids, every grade, I think it down through kindergarten. So we were able, but now it's similar to the turf fields. Eventually, the pay date's coming through for these, and I think if we come up with a funding plan where we don't have to worry about it every year, it's gonna be really pay off for the town of Walpole. So I'm working on some of these. Some of these were new today when I first received this list, but we'll work through it for sure.
Okay. Anything else, Glenn? No. Okay, thank you. Any other final comments before we close out this capital ARPA discussion?
I'm just noticing on sewer and water, it would be great if there was a more comprehensive plan, because when you're looking at the capital and the ARPA, some items are not. The water main is concerning to me, because we have a number of water mains in town that need, are aging, and we can't fall behind on that. So that's concerning that it's on ARPA, but it's not currently on capital. So if ARPA doesn't come through with the funding, we're not borrowing for it, we don't have it on capital, what is the plan?
So I can tell you the list is somewhat different, and I have my side notes here. So for example, Will's treatment membrane replacement at 1.125 million, and cleaning the raw water lines at 475 is both on the capital and ARPA. The sewer and water commissioners only submitted those two items as part of ARPA. They also submitted the Morningside Drive on the sewer side as part of ARPA, but it's different on that's just the priority they decided to forward to your board.
I do agree with what Glenn was starting to talk about, which is the whole idea of, and I don't know enough about it, you know a lot more than me, obviously, but when you think of, just like we do with buildings, we know every building needs a certain amount of maintenance every year, and at some point you've got to spring for a new building or an addition or whatever, and water and sewer pipes are the same way, right? We know we have the pipes, we know the ages of the pipes, we know which ones are likely to have a problem next, and we need to budget to do so many feet or miles of pipe, whether it's water or sewer, every year. And I don't know what's in their plan, but I think that's what you were getting at is, what is the plan looking forward every year for 10 years? Like, are we replacing pipe at a rate fast enough to minimize disruption to the residents and the users within the enterprise fund model? So I understand that, a certain amount of revenue comes in, but they have to decide how much covers current year operations versus how much covers either replacing pipe directly or financing pipe to be replaced directly. So,
And
and that's what I'd like to know more of. So.
This $2.8 million number really sounds familiar to me. I feel like it's the exact same number that was requested and borrowed last year for this exact same water pipe replacement. So it seems to me, and I think Rick, the DPW, and Scott should come in and talk about this, but it seems to me that $2.8 million is the number that the administration
every
has
year.
decided that it should be approximately every year. And if maybe there's an issue with the borrowing debt limit, then maybe it's 2.5. Maybe we can't afford 2.8. Maybe it's 1.8. But it shouldn't be zero. It's really what I'm getting at.
Agreed,
Yeah.
yeah. It's like roads.
Yeah.
I mean, if we don't spend any money on roads for another year, we fall further behind than we already are.
Yeah.
Like, we already know we're behind.
Mhm.
Because the state doesn't give us enough money to replace the right percentage of roads. But
Yeah.
that's why we as a town kick in extra money every year to try to do more, feet, yards, however we measure roads, miles
Same idea,
probably.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
same
and
thing with water.
So
Sure.
I agree, but I think we need to be thinking about what we do with the ARPA money as a way to, the enterprise funds are in trouble, we know that. And they're in trouble because of reasons we all know, we need to get into that here. By allocating some ARPA money to take care of some of these capital requests, I'm hoping we can jumpstart them back down the path of getting those enterprise funds healthy again. I also think we need to look at borrowing, and those are two different things, okay? These enterprise funds are funds that are available to us, they're reserves in my mind, whereas borrowing, you go to market for that. And so I think it will be important for us to understand what the 5-year plan is. And again, it's not our purview, they're an elected board, they're separate from us. It's totally up to the water and sewer commissioners to make sure all these things are happening. But I do think as the executive board for the town, it behooves us to understand it perhaps better than we do. And Glenn, I know you understand it, but as you just said, Mark, I don't have a good feel for it either. And I do think it would make sense for us to have some discussion. So all the more reason why I'd like to just have them come in on the 23rd. Let's talk about the two items that we know are priorities to them. Let's see if we can get going on that to get them down the path of getting stabilized in those enterprise funds and help with some of the capital. And then let's agree on some path forward with them to understand their capital planning process. And how do they think about it? Because I don't know. And I think it's incumbent upon us to understand that. Okay?
Yeah. I also think, to Jim's point, we're running out of time, because fall town meeting is gonna be here before we know it.
Well, we are,
Yeah.
and we're running out of time, as we frequently are, so that's why we've tried to keep pushing it, but without them in the room here, and also without having all 5 members of our board here, I think we're far better served by waiting another 2 weeks, okay? All right, good. Let's move forward. So we're into open forum now. Nobody's here except Patrick Shield, who I don't think is too interested in open forum yet, so we'll move on. Thanks, Patrick. So new business, we've covered 1 and 2. Let's move quickly through the remainder. So Ally?
Motion to approve request to hold Harvest Fest on Saturday, October 1st, 2022 in the vicinity of Stonefield, and approve request to hold the annual Halloween parade on Saturday, October 26, 2022, beginning at 10 a.m.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
400.
The next item is, are we ready?
Yeah.
Yep,
go
motion
ahead.
to approve request of Frank Mosher of Knights of Columbus for a 1-day all-alcoholic beverage license on August 13th, 2022, from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. at 137 Stone Street.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 400.
And next would be motion to renew the stadium event parking lot license at 1887 Washington Street with 45 spaces.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
400.
Next item on our list, motion to approve request of Scott Ferguson to hold a block party with music on September 11th, 2022, from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. on Shuflet Road and Beechwood Drive, subject to final approval from the Walpole Police Department.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
400.
Motion to approve request of Anand Rangana to hold a block party for music on August 30th and August 31st, September 1st and September 2nd from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. in the cul-de-sac of Anderson Way, subject to final approval from the Walpole Police Department.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
400. Okay, on to the consent agenda.
Consent agenda, motion to accept the gratitude, the following donations, multiple donors in memory of Carol Lane to the Willett Pond Access Account in the amount of $875. Multiple donors to the Hometown Hero Banner Program in the amount of $100. Mary Senevi to Night Before the Fourth gift account of $100. And Joan Hana Katana to Liberal Library Material Gifts in the amount of $100.
With thanks, seconded.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
400. A very quick comment here. We lost Carol Lane recently. Carol, for those of you who know her, is a longtime serving member of Finance Committee, Capital Budget, Town Meeting, and I'm sure many other things. Carol was a very special person. She always brought the history and the context to any conversation that she was in. Her long tenure on these boards and committees and her activities beyond that in the community was something that the town, got so much from. And having her be able to say, 20 years ago, this is why we did what we did was really, really always really helpful. And so it was sad to see Caroline pass. It's nice to see these contributions to the Willett Pond Access Account, which Carol was also very active in with coming in. And so I just wanted to make sure that we didn't let the moment pass without mentioning that. Thank you. On to the minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes of July 12th, 2022 as presented in our packet.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
400. Jim, Town Administrator update?
Sure, just a few items. So, just an update on Gill Street. I think last meeting we talked about leaving it open to two-way traffic. I checked with both Chief Bailey and Chief Kelleher. We haven't had any issues whatsoever since the last meeting. It is summertime. Some people go out of town. Everybody's taking their summer vacation. No schools in session. So we're gonna continue to monitor it. And if adjustments need to be made, we'll let the select board know. Obviously, I'll keep this on at least for a couple meetings as a running update from the TA. But right now, everything's going pretty well, leaving it as a two-way traffic right there. Gillette Stadium, we talked about that. So the upcoming events is August 11th, August 19th, as well as Pat's preseason games, and the 26th and 27th for Kenny Chesney. We'll keep a really close eye on all those items. Middle school building, we talked about, it's at 60% design phase. They're working on refining some of the numbers. One item, as we talked through it tonight, I'd like to probably ask Brian Jarvis, and I'm sure, Ally, I think you're still on the committee technically, right?
I'm still on it.
So maybe you and Ben could give the select board, along with Brian, an update as to where we are at the next meeting. Just have it as an agenda item. By then, the school building committee will have voted on the 60% design phase, just so the board can hear firsthand. Any issue with that, or?
No, I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
Yeah, great idea.
And one last item, town meeting, obviously, we set it for October 7th. Right now, we have about 12 to 14 drafted articles. I know the bylaw committee probably has some items coming. I don't think planning board is going to push anything forward at this time. Patrick Duchesne's did come forward with a couple of items to update them on, but the planning board chair wanted some more time to study those, and there's no street acceptances on, so it could be a light town meeting, knock on wood, but we'll see how it goes. And that's it for me.
Okay, any questions for Jim?
I'd just like to make a comment. I know we talked today when the people were in about, the things that Walpole did to try to make the concert traffic better. Yeah, I know that you went over with Chief Kelleher to meet with the Gillette people and the state police and all that. I think that probably was very helpful as well, to explain to them some of the issues that we're having specifically.
And we have another meeting with them next week. So,
And specifically, I remember from all my days traveling up Route 1 and down Water Street, a lot of the traffic flow depends on how quickly they open those parking lots. And, rumor is they did open some of the lots earlier than normal to help with traffic. And you should let them know we greatly appreciate that, because that really helped on our side of the equation. So, anything you can do to let them know we appreciate all the help they gave us, that would be a good thing too.
I think we were not ignored on this, in this particular case. I think the news coverage helped. State police certainly moved things along. So I think you're right, Mark. So,
Yeah, so I think it was just a great team effort all around, through all the different groups, so,
thank you.
yep.
Great. Okay, any other comments for Jim, questions for Jim? Okay, could I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. 400. We're adjourned. Good night, everyone.